Welcome to the webinar on AI-powered healthcare solutions against COVID-19. This has been curated by Renee Zhao, NVIDIA Global Healthcare AI Startups Lead, who's had an incredible career to date. And again, I want to thank her for curating this event today, as well as our esteemed panelists who are going to be joining us. Renee is going to introduce the panelists, so I'm not going to do that at the moment. Having said that, I just wanted to share with you all that I have degrees in electrical engineering and biology, and so I'm particularly excited about today's session, which will span these disciplines. So just a little bit about Zoom etiquette. All participants are going to be muted except for the speakers. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentations. Please submit your questions in chat and I will read the questions to the panelists. There will be a follow-up blog with presentation materials, and the video link will be posted on womeninbigdata.org in about a week. Okay, so a little bit about Women in Big Data. Our mission is to champion the success of women in big data careers. So that could be data engineers, data scientists, visualization engineers, could be the marketing side or sales side of data science and so on. So it spans lots of careers. And we have grown the organization from 15 people that have this really cool idea about how do we continue to build a community of women in this domain. In 2015 to now, over 16,000 members in 6 continents. I joined the organization in 2016 when we were about 1,500, and it's been a remarkable and wonderful ride. These are some of our sponsors and partners, and of course NVIDIA is a very important partner and sponsor, and again this whole event is brought to you by NVIDIA. So please join us, volunteer, partner, sponsor, find your local chapter and meet up at womeninbigdata.org. Join our LinkedIn group, Women in Big Data Forum. We have a Facebook group. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. We also have a video you can check out, which is also on our website. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask that Renee goes ahead and takes this session away. And if you can give me a moment, I seem to be having a little technical difficulty here. Okay, let's see. Okay, Renee, take it away. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great, and I will be sharing screen right now. Let me know when you guys can see my presentation.
I can see it.
Great, awesome. So I'm very glad to have a great panelist, panelists with me here today. So the next couple minutes, I will walk you guys through. And first of all, just from the agenda perspective, thank you, Regina, for the welcome. And then after the quick intro, then I'll dive into my section, and then Avantika will be sharing with us a little bit more about open science, and Monica will share with us on computational design, and Sahar will talk a little bit more about some of the anticipated demands during COVID, and Sinhu, who will be sharing a little bit more about online virtual care. And I know for those of you who came in on either the meetup or through LinkedIn or Twitter, I actually have posted the next couple of slides about the detailed talk titles, details, and also speaker bios. for you guys, so you guys can take a closer look. But just as a quick intro, I've been at NVIDIA for more than 4 years, and I mainly manage 800 healthcare AI startups, and I was a product manager as well at NVIDIA prior to joining the healthcare team. And Avantika is our deep learning and genomics scientist at NVIDIA, and she previously was also a researcher at Stanford University. Monica, she got her PhD and is an entrepreneur and scientist and software engineer. Very robust background right here. Very fortunate to have her share with us a little bit about drug discovery. Sahar is a co-founder and chief operating officer at CloudMedx, and she has over 15 years of experience in technology development management for software and hardware and health tech companies. And last but not least, we have Sinhu, who leads the machine learning team at Curai, a health tech startup using AI to do telehealth. And prior to joining this startup, she also held research and engineering positions at Netflix and Samsung Research. Great. All right. I will start going into the presentation now. So from the agenda perspective, I will quickly share who NVIDIA is as a company for those of you who may not know us as well. And then I will go into a little bit more about the COVID response from NVIDIA and also the startup ecosystem overall. Then last but not least, I will end on a couple of resources and next steps. All right. So for those of you who may not know NVIDIA as that well, lots of gamers, of course, love us so much. They love using GPUs to play games. And NVIDIA is actually at the heart and center of graphics, high performance computing, and also AI. I don't want to say that we're 100% COVID proof, but I think we're very fortunate to be able to support a wide range of industries. And what makes us quite unique is we have this one architecture across many different industries that have quite a large TAM around them. And today specifically, I'll be focusing on healthcare, which is a $7 trillion industry. And I'll say what makes NVIDIA quite unique is we set our minds out like about several decades ago to really make sure that we are positioned as this AI computing platform. And besides like just only focusing on this speed up, like X factor, right? Like X factor faster in performance on a single chip level, we actually have put in a lot of work to be able to do this full stack optimization and acceleration. We have more software engineers than hardware engineers actually. And from there, we ensure that our GPUs can actually be in the cloud, data center, edge, and basically everywhere that you can find. And I would say that I was very fortunate to be able to witness this AI renaissance that we call it, from the discovery of AlexNet to really realizing that AI could see or identify or detect any objects really better than human could. Then like as soon as we figure out this BERT model, the transformer models, we start realizing what we could do in natural language processing. We were given quite a new way to understand things, like being able to summarize or write things and have a dialogue, right? And a decade ago, you were probably on the internet and you were searching, right? And now think about your search experience. You're actually recommended by certain things. And AI is actually understanding you and recommending you things, and sometimes even better than you know it yourself. And in healthcare specifically, we actually had a similar journey. We actually been in this space for like more than a decade, and from diagnosing imaging to creating sensors, CT devices, MR, ultrasound, all computing that's needed to create real-time image reconstruction, to molecular simulation and drug discovery space, where we simulate how diseases have manifested themselves inside of these like models. And around like 2003, I think, is when we actually realized deep learning was able to apply to pathology space in particular to detect mitosis. And that's where we realized how much of a difference we could make in this space. And we started emerging into this understanding space also for healthcare. And that resulted in us creating what we call the NVIDIA CLARA application framework. So NVIDIA CLARA essentially is an application framework that has like full stack of GPU accelerated libraries, SDKs, and reference applications for developers, data scientists, and researchers to be able to create this real-time and very secure and scalable solutions. And on top of that, then we have a robust ecosystem partners building their applications and solutions on top. And you will hear from a couple of them today. And everything is running on this CUDA X layer on top of all of our GPUs, like the EGX, the DGX, and Cloud. And for CLARA specifically, we now have CLARA imaging for all of the imaging solution and CLARA Parabricks for all of the genomics effort. All right, now let's dive into COVID with the stage set, and we're all level set from why the NVIDIA's role in the healthcare space. Well, there's COVID. It seems like as soon as COVID came, everyone just went into a shock. The world is on pause or exploded. Thank goodness, our fierce leader, Jensen Huang, actually responded quickly. And he immediately sent out an email to us to say, stay home and stay healthy, but continue to also give back. The most heartwarming thing is he shared with us there is no layoff. And I think with that, we could all focus on the best work that we can do. And during this campaign, we call it the Giving Tuesday Now. We are amplifying employees' donation up to like 4x to help those affected by COVID-19. And during this time frame, we also joined the HPC consortium, which brings together like US government and industry leaders and academia to help accelerate this development to be able to better detect and contain and treat the virus. It provides like the researchers 30 some supercomputers with over 400 petaflops of compute resources available to do such great work. Folding at Home is actually a community project that brought together by volunteers and that brought together this 1.5 exaflops of home PC compute to crack the code of COVID. And it didn't just stop there, right? We actually made the software Parabricks that we acquired late last year available for free for 90 days. And it can really help accelerate the genomic sequencing analysis up to 50x. And our chief scientist, Bill, who also designed in his home office a very low-cost open source ventilator. And you can actually build from parts to functional in like 5 minutes. And it costs only about $400 with off-the-shelf parts instead of usually it costs $20,000. And even though we're now working remotely, I do feel like we are more together than ever. And we started this Work Remote with NVIDIA campaign, enabling all industry to do their lifetimes of work anywhere on top of V100 virtual GPUs. We also made the eval license for like about 500 users for free for 90 days. And among the 6,000 startups that are in our Inception program, there are about 200 of them actually responded back to our outreach saying that they have a COVID-19 specific solution. So in the next hour or so, you will hear from 4 of them. And that was a quick summary of everything from NVIDIA and our ecosystem perspective, our response to COVID-19. I have to say I feel really proud to work at NVIDIA, a place where we feel very safe and empowered to do such great work. So I included a link at the bottom of the slide where we do provide weekly updates for you guys to take a look at in terms of the efforts around our ecosystem on fighting COVID-19. Every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, I actually put this series called the Compute for COVID together. So 4 of them has already happened, available on demand through the link listed on the slide, and there are 3 more to come. And we'll continue to build out this series as well. Now on to the startups. So earlier I mentioned about the Inception program, which essentially provides a lot of support for the startups who join our program in terms of go-to-market support, expertise, and also some discounts on some of our GPUs and technologies and things like that. And most of our software solution stack is actually available for free. In our healthcare startups segment, we actually have 870 healthcare AI startups globally. And with that number, we actually range them across like medical imaging, instruments, genomics, drug discoveries, and medical analysis. And this is definitely an eye chart, but I wanted to share this as a leave behind slide, and I will just only highlight a few here. And when COVID happened, here are some of the interesting trends that we spotted. In the intelligent video analytics space, especially the infrared imaging, will grow by $830 million by 2024. And in the medical devices space, infectious disease startups is actually a focus. In the medical imaging space, of course, we have been hearing a lot about like the uncertainties in terms of the imaging volume in the near term. But of course, the RSNA actually just posted that post-COVID surge definitely needs very strong preparation, and AI is here to stay. From the mental health perspective, there's a record high of $500 million investment in Q1. And genomics, next-gen sequencing, based RNA sequencing reached $4.2 billion by 2024. And drug discovery informatics will grow 11.5% compounded annual growth rate. That's the number. And from the analytics perspective, of course, we've been, wherever there's data, we need analytics and data science, and that will continue to grow. And as of 2018, that number is about 126 million. And it will grow at a 27% compound annual growth rate till 2024 because of reducing paperwork and also better treatment plans. Last but not least, telehealth, record high in investment, and also the news just doubled in Q4 since Q4 2019. And this just set the stage for the next part of my presentation, because all of these key trends, we definitely see startups actually reflect these trends very well. So let's take a look at the video analytics space, right? So Whiteboard Coordinator based in Chicago, they deployed in 16 hospitals and can detect like up to 600 people per minute on fever and mass detection. Smart Cow, they can detect gloves, mask, apron, and things like that, already deployed in hospitals in France and Switzerland. Taking Care based in Milan can detect like 40 beds at once on one GPU to be able to detect falls, meals, time spent with patients in care homes in Italy and Spain. OVA, they are deployed in Netherlands and provide these contact-free care platform to be able to monitor patient safety, room hygiene, and bed turnover in real time. So this list continues to grow on a regular basis for us. And this is a long list of startups that came together to improve the patient care and also public safety. And I think they're doing great work to enable a lot of us to be able to go back to work sooner. And of course, I focus on healthcare, but there are many of the companies like them that focus on many other verticals and industries. And in this intelligent instruments or devices space, for lack of a better word, we're also seeing a shift, a change, and also growth as well. And the first one is actually from Oxford Nanopore. They have this mini IONN device for sequencing. They can monitor like infectious disease outbreak. The Nanopore workflow can actually provide a consensus viral genome in less than 7 hours. Very, very impressive. Caption Health, an AI-guided ultrasound tool. I think the news came out earlier this week that they actually received an expedited 25-day review FDA clearance, where that process could usually take up to like 6 months. And this This system provides like more than like 90 some types of real-time instructions and feedback. So it really gives the providers who don't have the specialized echocardiography training the ability to capture images at the point of care, both reducing the risk of COVID transmission and also like conversing the use of personal PPE, personal protective equipment. And the KiwiBot, this cute little robot, is AI enabled, and since COVID-19, they actually have already delivered 5,000 meals to people in need. If you take a look at that picture, they actually have like saran wraps around it just to ensure that they are also hygiene proof. Very, very cute. They're based in Berkeley, so go Bears, great work guys there. AI4ia is an example in digital pathology space. A lot of us know that the elective surgery is definitely put on hold in many of the places, and the workload for some of the pathologists is lower in the near term, yet a lot of the pathologists are now actually work from home and need digital workflow. FDA also relaxed the regulation in this area, so now it's actually easier to deploy scanner to primary diagnosis, and AI4ia actually accelerates COVID-19 related drug and vaccine development by accurately and quantitatively be able to analyze the samples of lung tissues. It helps the researchers to be able to uncover some of the mechanisms of the disease. And NVIDIA and many of the startups have been in the medical imaging space for quite some time. So in this first box right here, I actually have about like more than 200 startups working on medical imaging space specifically, just within the Inception program alone. Give you a couple of examples, right? Like RoboVision, Cumbium, Smart Reporting from EMEA. BioMind this morning actually just made an announcement that they came out in Singapore. Runo and Lunit from Korea, and Shuquan and Infravision in China. Darwin AI based in Canada, they just open source and provided this COVID net for the ecosystem to collaborate together. Project Monai was started by us and with King's College London collaboration. We made this open source foundation with a PyTorch-based framework for deep learning in healthcare imaging, and leveraging a lot of the CLARA imaging techniques as foundation. TrainingData.io is another startup that we work closely with, where they actually make some of their COVID-19 imaging data sets available. And you can use their tools for like annotation and collaboration and things like that. There are many consortiums also being formed in the ecosystem, like this imaging COVID-19 AI initiative. It's like a multi-center European project to be able to enhance like CT in diagnosis of COVID-19 by using AI. And this COVID-19 Open AI Consortium, led by Oken out in Europe as well, they leverage federated learning to power research in COVID-19. Very great work from the ecosystem. So you heard earlier in the trend, RSNA did mention that there may be a decrease in imaging volume in the near term, but they also send out a release that was 3 pages long to ask the imaging industry to be prepared for the surge coming post-COVID. And definitely there's tons of news saying AI is here to stay and to help and continue to help the radiologists to be able to triage patients. Now, I know a lot of that may be interesting, but not as close to home to some of us, maybe just honestly feeling bored, stressed, and depressed at home. So our mental health is more important than ever. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but conversational AI, emotional intelligence, AI immersive experience through VR created a world where we can be heard, connected, and helped. I haven't tried out any of these personally, but they are all in our Inception program. So they've gone through a vetting process. And I'm not here to endorse any of these companies, but I just want to let those of you who may need help to let you know that here are resources for you. All right, and of course, genomics, drug discovery, analytics, and telehealth are extremely important areas, as I mentioned in the trend. And that's why I invited these great speakers to come on and share with you guys more in details about their learnings and breakthroughs today. And I hope now that really gives you a good understanding of where NVIDIA fits in the healthcare ecosystem. The gray boxes on top are the every segments where NVIDIA actually plays a role. We actually will continue to enrich and enhance what we call the NVIDIA CLARA application framework to continue to support this great ecosystem that builds on top of our building blocks of tools and solutions that are free and open for the community. And I was asked actually, so how exactly does NVIDIA help the startups? So I'm gonna just share with you an eye chart, right? No matter if it's from just asking us, hey, Renee, like out of the 800, which use case actually gonna move the needle in what industry, or which go-to-market partner should I partner with, right? Or which deep learning framework should I be using on what SDK on top of which GPUs? All those questions, we have a dedicated solution architect, or you can call them the GPU genius to be able to help you guys. So reach out to us and let us enable your work. And of course, the next couple slides are just for you to keep, right? We have GPUs in the data center, at the edge, in the cloud. All major cloud service providers have our GPUs in there. With a swipe of your credit card, you can get a couple of the hours of GPUs and get started with your work. And this slide is just a spec slides are listed for you to take home and take a look at. And expect this slide to be outdated tomorrow, because tomorrow is our Jensen's keynote at 6 a.m. Pacific time. This video of what Jensen's been cooking, apparently is the world's largest GPUs, was posted on YouTube. Already have several thousands of just a couple seconds, 30 seconds. So take a look at it and tune in on YouTube and learn more about our great announcement coming tomorrow. And as promised, last but not least, I'll leave you with some useful content. Download Parabricks for free to start your genomics work. Follow us on a weekly basis where we provide updates where NVIDIA and ecosystem partners coming together to fight COVID. Take a look at our Deep Learning Institute, many free classes. Tune in on our next Compute for COVID episodes every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time. We have free health tech tips and solutions in our Healthcare on Tap series every Thursday at 8 a.m. And join our Inception program with the ecosystem of startups and stay up to date and stay safe, everyone. With that, Avantika, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Renee. Just sharing my screen here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So thanks, everybody. My name is Avantika. I work on the Deep Learning and Genomics team at NVIDIA. And I'm here to talk about open science for COVID-19 genomics. So we all know that COVID-19 is spread across the entire world in a matter of months. And last I checked, it had caused over 4 million cases and almost 300,000 deaths, not to mention the massive social and economic disruption. At the same time, there's a small silver lining to this, in that the crisis has brought together researchers from all over the world in a way that I personally have never seen before. And everyone is just working incredibly hard and coming together to pool their skills and find solutions. For today's talk, I want to give you one example of this. So this is an amazing event that I recently took part in. It's called the virtual COVID-19 BIOHACKATHON. And this event involved over 100 researchers from academia and industry in several working groups, all applying data analytics, engineering, and machine learning tools to understand COVID-19. Some groups tackled the biology of COVID-19, and others built open source tools to help other people study the pandemic. And I'm going to talk specifically about the work of the Gene Expression Working Group, which I was part of. And our goal was really to try and understand the biology of COVID-19 and to ask questions like, can we understand how human cells react to COVID-19? What are the mechanisms by which this virus affects human cells? And how do our cells try to fight off the infection? And can we answer questions like this while sitting at home and having no access to anything except public data? So to give you a glimpse into how we address these questions, I need to start with some background about the biology of COVID-19. So this pandemic is caused by a virus known as SARS-CoV-2, which belongs to the coronavirus family. And each virus particle is on the order of 100 nanometers in size. It's covered with a thin membrane studded with proteins. And inside this membrane is a long molecule known as RNA. This RNA molecule is what we call the genome of the coronavirus. Some of you may be wondering what RNA is. You've heard of DNA, the molecule that makes up the human genome. RNA is a molecule that is chemically very similar to DNA with a few differences. While DNA has two strands that coil around each other, RNA is a single-stranded molecule. And DNA is famously a sequence of 4 repeating units called A, G, C, and T. RNA is very similar. It also has 4 repeating units, with the exception that it has a U in place of a T. But as convention, sometimes when we write the sequence of an RNA genome, we often write T in place of U just so that we are representing RNA and DNA genomes in the same way. So I'll show some slides with the sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 genome, and you'll see T written there in place of U. So with that background, back to the genome of this virus. The RNA molecule inside the SARS-CoV-2 virus is about 30,000 bases long. That means that we can represent the chemical structure of this molecule as a 30,000 letter long sequence, like this portion shown over here. That's about the virus. But to study COVID-19, we need to not only look at the virus, but also look at the human cells it infects. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background into the biology of human cells and the tools that we use to study this biology. Every human cell contains a long sequence of DNA, which is about 3 billion letters long, and this is our genome. On this DNA molecule, there are some specific segments, about 20,000 or so, which are very important to us. And these segments are known as genes. What do genes do? Well, genes can do something that the rest of the genome can't. Each gene can produce molecules of RNA, which inherit the unique sequence of that gene. And these RNA molecules then give rise to proteins. The proteins produced in this way form the structure of our body, they catalyze reactions, and they perform all sorts of biological functions. For example, insulin is a protein produced in pancreatic cells by the insulin gene, and keratins, which make up your hair, skin, and nails, are all proteins. The final element in the story is that each gene in the human genome has its own level of expression. Expression means how many molecules of RNA that gene produces. So as an example, the gene on the right over here has higher expression than the gene on the left. I'm ignoring a whole lot of complexity here, but by sequencing all of the RNA molecules in a human cell, we can count the number of RNA molecules produced by each gene on the genome. And from this count, we can learn to what extent that cell is producing different proteins, and therefore to what extent it's carrying out different biological functions. For example, if we observe a cell and we see that it has high expression of genes that promote an immune response, that tells us the body is trying to fight off an infection. So we went looking for public data related to COVID-19 and RNA. And we found a group of scientists who had sequenced RNA molecules from human lung cells, both healthy lung cells and lung cells infected by SARS-CoV-2, and shared their data publicly. By analyzing the sequencing data, we were able to count how many RNAs were produced by every human gene in healthy cells and infected cells. And by applying some statistical testing to these counts, we were able to build a list of human genes whose expression was significantly increased or decreased in SARS-CoV-2 infected lung cells. And this kind of list tells us how infected cells are different from healthy cells. We then integrated data from public databases containing different experiments to identify the likely functions of these interesting genes. We also performed the same analysis for different respiratory viruses like SARS and influenza. And comparing the results between all of multiple viruses allowed us to identify human genes that were uniquely affected by SARS-CoV-2. This could give us a hint into the unique properties of SARS-CoV-2 that have made it an unprecedented global crisis. So thus far, we tried to identify what changes SARS-CoV-2 causes in human cells. But we were also interested in going one step further and figuring out the mechanisms by which SARS-CoV-2 drives these changes. To go back a bit to the biology of the human cell, I explained that some genes have higher expression or lower expression than others. One reason why this happens is because of some proteins called transcription factors that bind to different genes in the human genome and control their level of expression. And we reasoned that we see all of these gene expression changes in SARS-CoV-2 infected cells. But SARS-CoV-2 might cause these gene expression changes by changing the underlying activity of some of these transcription factors. To test this, we model the expression of each gene in SARS-CoV-2 infected cells as a linear function of the activity of these underlying transcription factors that control the expression of genes. And this linear model allowed us to predict likely interactions between the SARS-CoV-2 virus and human transcription factors. A second mechanism we investigated concerns the viral genome. Research has shown that when an RNA virus infects human cells, the genome of the virus binds to many proteins in the human cell that it infects, and it hijacks these proteins, so to speak, using them for its own life cycle. By scanning the complete 30,000 base long sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus genome, we identified small subsequences which were similar to known sequences that bind to human proteins. And this allowed us to predict likely interactions between the SARS-CoV-2 genome, that RNA molecule, and human proteins in infected cells. And these interactions with human proteins might protect the viral RNA from damage or even help to create new virus particles. So that's the science we did, but I'd like to make a really important point here. None of us who did this work had a lab or any connections with people who were studying SARS-CoV-2 in the lab. We were able to do this because many other scientists around the world decided to share their work publicly. We drew all of our data from unpublished experiments shared on preprint servers, from viral genome sequences that people had sequenced around the world and deposited on GISAID, and from genetic information shared publicly on NCBI. In turn, our team, as well as all the other teams in this hackathon, committed to making all of our work open source, reproducible, and public. So all of our code, all of the results, and all of the Docker containers and workflows that are needed to reproduce this result are available on our group GitHub repository. And all of our results are being checked and rechecked and will be available on a preprint server very soon. I want to thank all of the amazing people who contributed to this project. So just look at the slide, the number and diversity of scientists from all over the world who came together and worked day and night to get here was incredible. I want to highlight two of the amazing women who really led this project, Mariana and Vanessa, and all of these people with really very different skill sets who just came together and pooled their resources to make this happen. And I want to share some lessons I learned from this experience. The most inspiring takeaway was that it's possible for all of us to do real science sitting at home. But the only way to make that possible is through massive collaboration between people with diverse skill sets across institutions and across national borders. And this kind of collaboration really doesn't happen very often. But motivated by the ongoing pandemic, people are stepping up to contribute their skills without any concern for things like publications or grants or institutional issues that are normally barriers to these kinds of collaborations at this scale. And when all those things cease to be priorities, science can suddenly progress much, much faster than its normal pace. But I want to add that all of this work that we did was still only possible because of the experimental scientists who made their data available immediately. So we really need people who gather this data to make it available as soon as they do the experiment. That's how we can do analyses like this in time. That's, again, not the normal convention of science. And many people in the normal course of events prefer to wait for months until their paper is published before they make this kind of data public. And that allows them to retain control and credit on their data. Now, we don't have months to wait, and this pandemic doesn't wait for anything. So it's really wonderful to see that while some scientists are still following these normal practices, a lot of people have just changed the way they do science and are making all of their data available immediately without waiting for publication. And that kind of open science, open sharing is absolutely essential and is the only way that we'll beat this pandemic. Finally, thank you all for listening, and stay home and stay safe. Thanks everyone, and turning the screen back to you, Renee.
Great. I think Monica is next, right?
Yeah, sorry, give me a second to share my screen.
Of course.
Okay, should be up now.
Yes,
Okay.
we can see your screen.
Okay, great. And so thank you very much. First, I just want to thank everyone for being here, and especially Renee and Regina for the invitation to give this talk and share a little bit about what we're doing. So just a little about Macromoltek. We're a software-enabled biotech company where everything we do stems from computational predictions that we can do and then test them experimentally and iterate from. So we go back and forth between using computers, testing in the lab, and learning from the feedback we get from the lab. We're the first company who has been able to computationally design an antibody based on some algorithms that we've built over years that study and understand how antibodies work. And then we're a very cross-disciplinary team, which I think is what helps us be able to bridge this gap between data science and biology. So our mission is to convert drug discovery into drug design by using computational methods to make better drugs, and primarily do this through partnerships with pharma and biotech companies. So to understand what we do and our contributions to the field, I want to give a little bit of background about what an antibody is and why it's important. So antibodies are proteins that are produced by the human. So it's your body's immune response to defend against disease. And then scientists have taken advantage of these antibodies, so these proteins that are found in your body, and can show that they can be isolated from different systems and made into very specific drugs. They're primarily used in diseases such as cancer and autoimmune disease, and have started to show promise as antiviral and antibacterial drugs. Antibodies have this special binding region, and that is what is used to target pretty much any protein. And this special property of antibodies is what makes them attractive as tools for medicine, research, and then as highly specific drugs. At Macromoltek, our primary focus is to design antibodies computationally and then eliminate a lot of the time and cost of developing them in labs. So traditional antibody discovery is very expensive, and the process that brought about the revolution of antibodies as drugs is to take a protein of interest, so something that has been isolated as being shown to cause a disease, and inject that into a mouse or some other animal system. Mostly it's done in mice, and those mice then produce antibodies to fight off that disease. And then you can screen through those antibodies to find which one is the one that's actually interacting with the protein of interest. Some problems with this, so it's been very successful over the years. Like I said, many drugs are antibodies and have been created this way. But some problems are the speed of doing this. It's a very long process. The fact that it doesn't always work, and then a lot of experiments have to be done after you've isolated that antibody in order to really understand it and then turn it into a drug. So you may not know this, but Mouth's law states that the processing power of mice does not double every 2 years. Computers, however, tend to double in power every couple of years per Moore's law. So imagine if with that increase in computing power, we could gain more complex and sophisticated algorithms to do new things and use that to improve medicine at the scale at which computational power improves. So this would allow us to create new drugs, to get them to market faster, and then have an unlimited number of experiments running in parallel. Furthermore, doing this computationally, failures become easier to bounce back from and easier to debug. So much like debugging a software problem, if we can take advantage of that, we can get results faster and make improvements to the way we're making those drugs. So we want to move drug development from the lab into the cloud. So given that, that animal model that I showed you, this is what development timeline looks like for a mouse with the mouse on top compared to computational methods on bottom. The time to generate the antibodies is significantly reduced, and the designs are made in a tightly controlled system, so the post-processing is virtually eliminated. And in addition to the increase in speed of computational methods, there are other reasons to do things computationally. This allows us to access binding sites and states that would otherwise be inaccessible. So our antibodies can do things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And our antibodies are built on human scaffolds, which means that there's less post-processing needed before it can be used as a drug. And we're using these methods now to create better treatments and prevention for COVID. So as I mentioned before, an antibody is a protein that's produced by our body's immune system, helping you defend against disease. And it has this special binding region that allows it to target pretty much any protein. At the interface between the antibody and its target protein, we look for biophysical and structural features that can guide that interaction. So shown on the right, you can see an antibody in blue and that target protein in red. And then the details of that interaction are shown in the middle. And that the interface between the antibody and the protein of interest. So when structural biologists are looking at these things, they're trying to find, they're looking at a very complex interface made up of dozens of chemical interactions, such as what you see on the left. And then what we want to do is take this and turn it into something that can be visualized by computers. So the antibody side of the interface, or the blue part, is the part that we're trying to design. So in the previous slide, you saw what structural biologist looks like. And again, this can be illustrated in a couple different ways to represent things to a computer. This representation is very powerful, and it opens up the door to recent advances in machine learning and computer vision, which include powerful convolution neural networks, and those are very well suited for things like GPUs. So we're able to represent interface interactions from the previous slide into either a graph or a voxel-based network, and then use that to feed it into our machine learning algorithms. So computational design does present some challenges. Here we're looking at the target protein against which we want to design an antibody. And on the surface of that protein, there are many possible locations that you could target. So in that case, we still need to identify the best spot to design against in order to increase our chances of success. So we take this protein and we find the best place. So that's what's shown on the left. Then on the right, once we've identified thousands of different designs, we have to filter through them in order to find the one that's most likely to work. So previously, both these steps would be done pretty manually by someone who's very trained in structural biology. But expert time is expensive, whereas machine learning models are fast, cheap to operate, objective, and can be done in a replicable manner. So now we use machine learning techniques to map probabilities of binding regions directly onto the surface of a protein using neural networks. Once we've identified locations where we want to design our antibodies, we feed that into our computational design process and iterate through millions of possible sequences of antibodies in order to find one or a selection of them that could work. We then take our new machine learning algorithms and use those to select down to a manageable set of antibodies that can then be tested in the lab. And this selection process is done using, again, neural networks. So this has freed up experts from doing tedious tasks so that they can work on other problems. So our biochemists don't have to spend time looking at hundreds of structures, and the in silico approach allows us to scale and improve our algorithms from week to week. So anytime we do an experimental validation, we take that information, feed it back in, and that allows us to improve our algorithms continuously. So now what are we doing specifically around COVID? So first, a little bit about it. There's still no current vaccine, and treatments that have shown to work right now are repurposed from existing drugs. So these are a little bit less effective, and most of these are small molecules instead of proteins such as an antibody, and they're more like, so small molecules are more likely to have dangerous drug interactions. they're a little, they can't be used as preventatives. So we need something that's very specific for COVID-19 in order to come up with a treatment that can be used. So this slide every day is out of date, but as of last week, there were 3 million cases, over 200,000 deaths in 130 countries. And there are over 500 ongoing clinical trials of a lot of those repurposed drugs that I discussed. One of these, for example, is an Ebola drug that was recently granted emergency use access by the FDA. And this has been shown to decrease the course of the disease from 14 days to 10 days. So it's really promising that we can find a cure or a treatment for this. And to show that a lot of people are interested in this, that more than billions of dollars have been pledged for development of vaccines and therapies by different governments. So as Avantika showed us before, she gave a great overview of the virus itself. And so what this slide shows is the life cycle of how that virus interacts with human cells. So what we do is we've found a protein on the surface of the virus that's called a spike protein, and that spike protein interacts with the human ACE2 protein, and we have antibodies that can be used to block that binding. This allows this prevents the virus from even entering into a human cell. And so there are different modes of action and different stages at which you can treat the infection. And those are shown here in this slide. But what we're trying to do is prevent it from ever entering the cell in the first place. This would allow us to have not just a treatment, but also prevent infection, even if for only a short time frame. So up to this point, we've been able to use our machine learning algorithms to design some antibodies and test these for binding against that spike protein I discussed. And so we've shown promising results with strong binding and specificity against the spike protein. So now what we're doing is taking these antibodies and moving them further along, as well as increasing that pool and adding more and more antibodies to the pool that can be tested. So some of these antibodies that we've already identified, next steps are to take them and test them as antivirals in cells using neutralization assays. So seeing, does it actually kill the virus or stop that interaction, and then testing it in animals themselves. So with that, it's a general overview of Macromoltek, what we do, and how we're addressing the COVID pandemic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. And next up, we have Sahar from CloudMedx.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Renee. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Let me know. I'll share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
Yep. Great, we can see it now.
Okay.
Could you put it in the presenter mode,
Yes.
maybe? Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll try to keep it short so that we have some time for questions in the end. So my name is Sahar. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of a company called CloudMedx based in Palo Alto. We're a healthcare AI company that has a mission to make healthcare predictable for everyone. And by everyone, we mean patients, providers, as well as payers. And so we are personalizing healthcare through data. So we use AI and big data to predict patient risks and automate care management at scale. So if the outcomes are not predictable, if they're unpredictable, it has direct impact on the costs, successful running of operations, quality, and then there's no personalized care possible. What we do is that we ingest data from different sources, from EMRs, from your hospitals, labs, consumer devices, and a bunch of other sources, both structured and unstructured data. And then using that data, we recognize patterns. We have a proprietary disease ontology that understands how different diseases, symptoms, labs, etc., interact with each other. And we have superimposed it with real world data to predict what the outcomes may be. We predict what the disease progression for patients can be, if there is an adverse outcome, so that it can be prevented and predicted in advance. And we predict both clinical as well as financial outcomes. And what we've built is a robust healthcare data infrastructure, and our AI algorithms are validated in the form of physician publications around those algos. So here's a quick video of the disease ontology that I just mentioned. So all of these are different nodes that represent diseases, labs, medications, etc. So what it is doing over here is that it's creating a relationship between diabetes and hypertension, and everything else is related. So when you go to doctor, you tell them about your problems, and then they ask you more questions, and then this becomes gets narrowed, and then you can come to a conclusion of what the reason for the problem may be. So this is a representation for that. And so who it helps and how. So this, our tool is available for patients. It is one of our tools is available on Medicare's website. We sell into health systems as well as payers. Some of them are mentioned over here, as well as healthcare IT companies, which would be med device companies, EMR companies, etc., which can use our APIs to ingest within their own software. So the kind of questions that we help answer are like, everyone wants to know, when are they going to recover? Will this procedure or drug or treatment work? How much will it cost? What can I prevent, etc. So we provide these answers by combining their data with our data set, and then predict what the possible outcomes could be. This helps in reducing unnecessary costs, assists with better resource planning. Let's say you can predict that at a particular hospital, there are 100 patients that are going to show up tomorrow. It assists with better resource planning so that you can have staff accordingly. It helps getting to the, and preventing gaps. And if there are any gaps in care, it helps prevent those. And again, all of this has direct impact on costs, operations, quality, and personalized care. So the tools that we have are in these three major categories. So we help with operational analytics, which includes surge and risk prediction. So predicting what kind of resources would you need, what kind of surge is expected, what is the risk, associated risks for adverse outcomes. And we also help in workflow automation. There's a lot of manual work, so we automate all of that. The second category is clinical analytics, where we help with stuff with disease progression, predict whether a patient with chronic kidney stage 3 is going to progress to end-stage kidney disease or not. Stuff like that. It's not specific to one disease, but we predict disease progression, care gap analysis, etc. And the third is a patient AI tool, which assists with AI triage assistance, as well as provides access, patient data access. So these three categories, so when our response to COVID is within these three categories, we repurpose these tools for COVID. So what we're doing right now is assisting in operational analytics, clinical risk, as well as patient risk assessment, again, in those three major buckets. So what does operation analytics mean in terms of COVID-19? So we assist in predicting what does the ED surge look like in the next 7 days, next 45 days. What we built is a air traffic controller guidance system. So it's like a command and control system that shows where resources are needed, how many resources do you have, when will you run out of resources, what are the disease hot zones, where are the community risks. There's which areas are flattening the curve, etc. So this really helps in decision making, when to reopen economy, what are the effects, what are the vulnerable populations, etc. So that is a command and control center that we've built, and we've launched with some of our partners. On the clinical side, we've also using the data that we have available right now, we've created a solution that helps in AI triage, like predicting what the severity and mortality looks like when a patient is admitted to a hospital, how many days will they stay in the hospital, what level of care would be needed, would you need a ventilator, would you need an ICU, what kind of resources would you need, and as well as best practice recommendation. The third tool is for patient risk assessment, where a patient can go to our site and do a free risk assessment for COVID. You enter in your symptoms, and it would tell you whether you're high, medium, low risk for infection, what are the nearest testing centers near you, what are the precautions, etc. And we'll go over these one by one in the next couple of slides. So this is on the enterprise AI side for search prediction. So you can start with the US map and see on the state level, as well as county level and hospital level, down to zip code level, you can see the how many days do you have until you run out of capacity, what is the percentage of capacity that is reached right now, how many patients are in hospital, etc. And much more detailed information. You can go into it, go into a specific county, city, hospital, and get detailed data. This is a view of a hospital. So within the hospital, you can see what do the admission trends look like over the next 45 days. How many would be would require ICU, how many would require ventilators. It also tells you other information, such as what is the last 7 days growth rate, what do the next 7 days or 45-day growth rate look like, how many more cases are expected, how many deaths are expected, etc. So it really helps in resource planning and knowing everything in advance so that you can plan better. The next tool is a patient risk assessment tool. What it does is that you enter your symptoms, and it will, you answer a few questions, and then it will tell you whether you're high risk, what should you do, who should you contact, what are the nearest testing centers, what are the next steps that you should take. And so, this is a quick background about the company. So we've been around for 5 years. We have integrations with some of the largest EMRs in the country. So that allows us to be within the workflows of hospitals. We do both on-premise as well as cloud deployments. And we have pre-built models that can be used by both payers as well as providers. We have a really strong NLU, Natural Language Understanding modules. This is why we're able to take in unstructured data in addition to structured data and really understand what does the current scenario for the patient look like, and then predict outcomes based on that. So the technology backend includes data aggregation from different sources in different formats, a proprietary clinical ontology, advanced clinical NLP, and then machine learning algos on top of it. And this solution is HIPAA compliant. And we have use cases in multiple areas. I mentioned a few of them, but it's used for algo development, for documentation on a community level risk assessment, as well as individual level risk assessment, as well as patient engagement. So this is just a quick background about the company. And if you want to know more about the work that we're doing within COVID, you can visit covid2019.health or cloudmedxhealth.com. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. And we're only 2 minutes behind, so we're doing great on time. All right, our last but not least speaker from Curai. Sandra, we can see you on the screen.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Great. It's coming up. Awesome. We can see your desktop. If you could put it in the presenter mode, that would be great.
I just put in the presenter mode. Can you try this?
Awesome. It looks great. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sindhu Raghavan, and I lead the machine learning efforts at Curai Health, which is a telemedicine platform. And today I will be talking about what we've actually done on our platform, some of the features we've integrated into our product for COVID-19, and some of these features are driven by AI. And before I jump into the presentation, I would like to thank Renee for having Curai Health over here. We are really excited to present our work, and yeah, just thank you, Renee, again. So let's take a look at some of the statistics on healthcare access and scalability. Today, over 50% of the world's population do not have access to essential health services. In US alone, around 30% of adults are underinsured. And we know like roughly a third of Americans try to self-diagnose every day using a variety of online resources. And on the provider side, roughly on an average, it takes about 15 minutes for providers to get through an interaction from start to finish. And we have more statistics that indicate that in not so distant future, there will be a sheer shortage of physicians. Needless to say, all these statistics basically indicate that our current healthcare system has issues with access and scalability, and it's not really scaling to today's patients' needs. Now, when COVID happened not too long ago, we saw that COVID placed an unprecedented demand on our traditional healthcare system. As it is, our current healthcare has issues with scaling, and now with COVID, this issue became exacerbated. And due to the nature of COVID, which requires social distancing, shelter in place, providers started to think about alternate ways to provide care to patients. There's been like a gradual shift towards virtual care, online care, and telemedicine. At Curai Health, we are building a telemedicine platform with the mission to scale healthcare to everyone. Now, we are a mobile-first care, always on and accessible. And what is different about us, when compared to a lot of other telemedicine platforms is the way we are, our technology towards scaling healthcare. We've integrated AI with human providers in the loop to make the providers more efficient, to scale their time, and to eventually be in a position to deliver affordable and quality care. And our system is always learning, and we have AI integrated in system in a manner that it operates in the wild. Let's take a look at what we mean by AI operating in the wild. Now, in a typical interaction, we have a patient coming to our platform and a doctor talking to the patient, gathering additional information, coming up with medical diagnosis, and then, coming up with next steps with the patient with respect to treatment and treatment planning. This is what a typical clinical workflow looks like. And here in various parts of the clinical workflow, we have integrated AI and automation in a manner that AI is making the provider more efficient, is removing some of the repetitive work that the provider is doing, thereby scaling the provider's time and thereby scaling this, provider's access, to a lot of patients. let's try to see, what we mean by AI in the wild and how we've actually integrated AI in the wild and how AI is working alongside practitioners. We've actually identified a few key properties, that we need if AI has to work really well with providers in the loop and in the wild setting. So the first thing is that the AI system needs to know what it doesn't know. What this basically means is, when there are scenarios that the AI system has already seen, the AI should have confidence that it's seen this and, go ahead and make predictions. But then when there are scenarios that the AI system has not seen, or when, for some reason the AI is not very confident, it should actually take a step back and let the physician in the loop step in to carry on with the conversation. What this means is that all our models should be able to, predict some kind of confidence estimates and their predictions. And based on these confidence estimates, it's like a decision needs to be made where whether AI has to step in or AI has to step back, allowing the physician in the loop to carry on with the conversation. The second property is that AI has to be extensible. What does this mean? I mean, this means that our AI system has to continuously learn iteratively from any new scenario that it sees on the platform, from any new data, feedback data that it's getting from the provider. And our models and architectures should be such that we should be very quickly be able to cold start for new scenarios that we've not seen so far. For instance, like when COVID happened, we realized that none of our data sources, none of our models had any information about COVID because this is completely new to humans, right? And as a result, it's like we still need to be able to cold start. And given that the way we've set up our AI, the architectures and the models in a manner that it made it really easy to cold start. I'll talk a little bit more about like how we actually approach this. But before that, let's take a look at how our AI-driven diagnostic assessment works. And I will talk about, it's like how we use this diagnostic assessment for COVID. So the diagnostic assessment step has two parts to it. One is gathering information from the patient, gathering pertinent information, and then coming up with medical diagnosis. For both of these, for both of these goals and for both of these objectives, we have AI and ML systems, trying to predict the sort of like next finding to gather information about, the next question to ask the patient, trying to automate information gathering. And once we've gathered all of this context and data or information about the patient, now we have predictive models that take all of these signals and come up with a medical diagnosis assessment. Now, for both of these sort of like goals or objectives, we have some key building blocks that go into these. For instance, we have expert system that's been curated over many years by doctors, and the expert system has information about various diseases, various disorders, and various symptoms, and how they interact and how they're related to one another. Along with that, we have curated knowledge that we have developed in-house using our clinical experts about a number of these diseases. And then we have machine learned models that are trained on a variety of data sources that actually go into making these predictions for these different tasks and objectives. Let's try to zoom in a little bit and try to see how we're learning from data. As you can see from the slide, our machine learned models are trained on a variety of data sources. We have data that's been simulated from expert systems. We have curated data coming from curated knowledge that's created in-house. And we have feedback data coming from all the feedback that we see on our platform. Now, one might wonder, why do we have so many different data sources? So this is where I would like to highlight, some of the challenges that we typically face in this setting for healthcare. Unlike a lot of other problems and settings, this is not a big data problem. This is actually a small data problem. For us, the challenge with data is we always see low volumes of like feedback data. even though we do have providers, in our platform that are providing feedback, it can take a really long time before we collect large volumes of data. And now we need to be creative about this data. So to kind of navigate this issue, to alleviate this issue, we've looked towards simulating data in a creative manner using expert systems. And the other challenge that we typically see in the healthcare setting is, it's like if we want AI to work in the wild, AI and ML should have coverage for a large number of disorders. Whether our ML models have seen these disorders in training or not, there still needs to be some amount of information and knowledge in our system to provide coverage for a large number of disorders. And we should be able to, cold start really quickly for new disorders. So in order to account for like coverage and cold start, we typically have knowledge and data that's curated in-house, by our clinical experts, which also feed into our machine learning models. And on the machine learning side, we have a combination of both conventional machine learning models and deep learning models. Now, when COVID happened, as I mentioned earlier, we realized that none of our data sources, none of our systems had any information about COVID. Now, in order to rapidly cold start for COVID, we ended up, looking at curating some knowledge in-house and simulating data from this knowledge and quickly bootstrapping our systems with this curated knowledge. I would also like to, highlight some of the engineering challenges that we typically face in this setting. So given that we have data coming from various different sources, we need to have not only engineering infrastructure, but also sort of like the know-how for combining data from different sources so that when we build these models, they actually make sense. These models are not specifically fit for one type of data source and such. And when we do integrate these models and AI in the wild, we need to be able to interpret predictions and incorporate the right kind of fallbacks. Like at what point, should we say that AI should take a step back and let the providers, carry on with the conversation. And we want all our machine learning models to compute predictions in real time with super low latencies. And unlike say other domains like recommender systems, we do not have the luxury to pre-compute predictions. It's not possible for us to predict what kind of scenarios come to the platform, what kind of symptoms patients come to our platform with upfront and pre-compute predictions. So what this means is that our modeling choices, our architectures should be such that the model predictions should happen with super low latencies in real time. And we want to have all of this integrated into our product and work in a way that it can scale to a large user base and concurrent traffic that we expect on our platform, due to COVID. So let's take a look at how we used all of the technology that we've built for diagnostic assessment, and how did we use it for COVID. And we've already seen one, it's like a risk assessment tool from CloudMedx that Sahar presented earlier. We also have like a similar diagnostic assessment tool, but it's like, what are we doing, apart from coming up with like risk scores for patients? And our diagnostic assessment tool is a lot more personalized. What we have is, it starts off with asking the patient about some of the common symptoms that we've seen with COVID. For instance, do you have cough, fever, and such? Then we try to move on to get more contextualized signals about the user, the patient. Like, are you a healthcare worker? Have you been exposed to somebody who's suffering from COVID, and so on? And it gets a lot more personalized and contextualized, where we try to, gather where this person lives to understand if this person lives in an area where, COVID is prevalent. And it goes on to ask more questions about a person's like past medical history, if the person has any existing, pre-existing medical conditions, and so on and so forth. And all these signals go into our, diagnostic assessment sort of like technology that we built. And it's like the AI technology then comes up with a personalized prediction along with the risk score. It also comes up with, sort of like advising the user whether to talk to the doctor, and telling the user more about how to kind of like care for the symptoms and so on and such. So the personalized diagnostic assessment is one of the different features that we have on our platform for COVID. Apart from that, we have a deep learning based question answer system that allows users to come and interact with FAQs that are curated from various sources, and they are vetted clinically in-house. So if a user comes to our platform and would like to understand and know more about COVID, it's like one way to kind of like get that information on our platform is by using this question answer tool. And if this question answer system cannot provide the right kind of answer to the user that the answer the user is looking for, we provide an opportunity for the user to talk to the provider to get their questions answered. And along with that, we have other features with respect to like care planning, follow-up, and such that we have implemented and integrated into our product for COVID. So just to wrap up my talk, the message that I would like to drive home at is today, based on some of the statistics I've shown, we know that there are issues with healthcare access and healthcare scaling. And there is an immediate need for healthcare to scale quickly. And towards this need, towards this goal at Curai Health, we are building a telemedicine platform, with the mission to scale healthcare access to everyone. We are a mobile-first platform, and we are always on and accessible. And the way we are integrating our technology to achieve the scaling is by integrating AI with human providers in the wild setting. And the AI technology is integrated in a manner such that it's making the providers efficient and scaling their time, and eventually providing quality and affordable care for everyone. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That was a great presentation. And that concludes our talk for today. And I guess we have about 6 minutes open up for Q&A from anyone. Regina, do you want to drive this since you're the host? Maybe there's some folks actually send you questions directly.
Yeah, sure. So please post your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And we've got 5 minutes. Otherwise, look for the post of the event in roughly a week on womeninbigdata.org.
We have a question that came in. How do you ensure patient privacy in these initiatives? Any speakers want to take a stab at this from your industry segment perspective? I can go first, actually. Yeah, it's just based on some of the startups that I've been watching, like one of the companies that was working on the intelligent video analytics specifically, because they're using essentially cameras to be able to detect fevers and mass detection, right? So they actually from the very, very beginning have built in HIPAA compliant and also de-identification of your tools. What that means is they actually started in a surgical room. This company is called Whiteboard Coordinator, and when they actually are detecting the patients or even the physicians, they actually blur them out specifically. So they will have this like black, you can call it the bounding boxes of these folks around the patients, so no one can actually see the patient's faces, especially. And then there was a question early on to say that then how can you tell that's actually the right patient, right? So for the companies that's actually been in the healthcare environment for a long time, they would have figured this out, where you have to connect with the EMR system, for example. So that company specifically, let's just say that they're using it for the surgical room operations from that perspective, right? In their EMR system, they will, or on their dashboard, they will be able to see during this time frame who is actually coming in. So they don't really need to show the faces to know which patient it is. And even if they were to send a message to the surgeon to say, hey, patient is en route to surgical room 4. Even in those messages specifically, they have designed with patient privacy in mind without mentioning the name. So I have personally seen a lot of solutions like that, where at the very beginning of training AI algorithms, they have actually leveraged de-identified patient data to be able to train the algorithms to best detect certain use cases. And I'll turn to some of the other speakers to maybe comment from their perspective.
Yeah, I can add to that. So whenever we do aggregated data analysis, it's de-identified data. So you cannot identify the patient. But a lot of data that we touch is PHI, which is identifiable. But when you're at a hospital, it's usually behind the firewall of the hospital. It's an on-premise deployment. Just like a physician uses an EMR, the insights are delivered within the EMR. So it's protected information which stays within the hospital and doesn't leave. In terms of our patient-facing solution, again, we've done, it's taken all privacy considerations in mind, so HIPAA compliance, as well as encryption, etc. Because the patient in our patient-facing app can upload their medical record and then, ask further questions to get personalized insights. In that case, we do have identifiable information, but we take in, patient privacy extremely seriously and have all measures in place that information is protected.
So I'd like to say a little bit about what we do. At Curai Health, we are a patient-facing telemedicine platform, and HIPAA compliance is taken very, very seriously, and it's there at various sort of like steps in our workflow. And it's like when we do have any kind of like PHI data, what we try to do is we go through a lot of like de-identification procedures, try to clean the data and make sure that all of our models are built on de-identified data. And also we take a lot of care in the company when it comes to educating employees about PHI and HIPAA compliance, and everyone is kind of like looking out to make sure that every bit is like HIPAA compliant and PHI is taken very, very seriously. So I mean, just in a nutshell, patient privacy is sort of like number one when you're working in these kind of settings, and just thinking about PHI and thinking about like HIPAA and patient privacy is kind of ingrained in the company at various levels and various sort of like pipelines and workflows.
Great, thank you. And we are out of time. We're at the bottom of the hour, and I want to sincerely thank all of the speakers and everyone for staying on this morning to learn about all of our great work. Regina, do you have any closing remarks?
Sure. So again, wanted to thank NVIDIA and all the speakers for a fantastic session. I will be posting most of the materials on womeninbigdata.org in the blog section within a week or so. And appreciate everybody's time, and stay safe and stay well. Thank you for your time. Meeting is going to be closed now. Thank you.
Thank you.